question is, can we believe in both science and religion? And I'm going to suggest that if you do believe in both science and religion, that you're not doing either of them properly. They're fundamentally different ways about approaching the truth about reality and approaching the truth about morality. Religion makes overt claims about the natural world as well as about the supernatural world, and you can claim to believe in both, and indeed you can to an extent believe in both until such time as you come up against an issue where the two approaches clash, and then you've got to choose. And when it comes to that clash, what you will find historically and consistently is that science advances the search for truth and that religion corrupts the search for truth. When religion tells you that miracles happen in the natural world and science tells you that they don't, you've got to choose between science and religion. When religion tells us that Jesus rose from the dead and science tells us that people don't rise from the dead, then you've got to choose between science and religion. When religion tells us that Muhammad flew on a winged horse and science tells us that there aren't winged horses, then you've got to choose between science and religion. When religion tells us that a person is possessed by an evil demon and science tells us that the person has a mental illness, then you have to choose between science and religion. When religion tells us that humans have a special relationship with the creator of the universe and science tells us that the universe consists of 100 billion galaxies, that's just the observable universe, each of which has 100 billion stars like our sun, and you see how insignificant humans on the planet Earth are, you've got to choose between science and religion. When religion tells us that humans and only humans have an immortal soul, and science tells us that humans are just another species of animal on the planet Earth, mortal like all other animals, then you have to choose between science and religion. When religion tells us that a fertilized egg is a human person, and science tells us that it's a cell that is a fraction of a millimetre in size, then you have to choose between science and religion. When religion tells us that being gay is unnatural, and science tells us that being gay is perfectly natural, you've got to choose between science and religion. When religion tells us that prayer works, and science tells us that not only does prayer not work, but it can have harmful consequences, then you've got to choose between science and religion. And when religion tells us that religion is good for society, and science tells us that secular societies are far stronger in terms of quality of life indexes in all ranges of measurements, then you have to choose between science and religion. But it's not merely in terms of the outcomes of what we believe that you have to choose between science and religion, because what is more significant is the way that we approach these beliefs and the way that we come to these beliefs. Because science approaches truth by observing reality and by proposing hypotheses and experiments and explanations and predictions that can then be tested and then relies on the evidence of those experiments. Whereas religion approaches truth by imagining realities based on supposed revelations by supposed imaginary supernatural beings and ignores the evidence of reality when the evidence of reality contradicts those already reached conclusions. Science knows that we will never reach truth, but that what we do is we gradually come nearer and nearer to the truth by discarding theories that evidence has shown to be inconsistent with reality. Religion claims to have already found the truth and proclaims it based on authority rather than on any evidence, and tries to maintain that illusion by just ignoring whatever evidence that contradicts its already reached theories. Most significantly, science advances by trying to prove its theories wrong, whereas religion stagnates by insisting that its theories are correct. With science, just one inconsistency is enough to rule a theory as being wrong. And with religion, any number of inconsistencies can be explained away by whatever theological arguments that theologians choose to come up with. Science has no vested interest in any particular outcome of its search for truth, whereas religion starts with the outcome and then works backwards. Scientists don't pray to try to insist that their versions of truth are correct. Scientists don't start wars with rival scientists when they disagree. Scientific theories aren't protected by blasphemy laws. There are so many differences in the method of approaching truth between religion and science that are as significant, if not more significant, than the outcomes in terms of the areas that I've already described, where you have to choose between science and religion when the two clash. There are other areas where religion claims to be compatible with science, rather than saying that they can prove what they're saying is correct. They say, well, it's compatible with science, science can't prove it wrong, and therefore it's a credible belief. But compatible with science is not a sensible test by which to decide what you believe. It's compatible with science to say that I went to Paris yesterday and dismantled the Eiffel Tower and crushed it down to the size of a matchbox. That's compatible with science. And none of you believe it because it's an absurd claim. Being compatible with science is not a good enough reason to believe something. It's compatible with science to claim that this university doesn't exist and we're all in an elaborate TV reality show hoax. But none of you believe that because it's an absurd claim, even though it's compatible with science. The idea of saying that something is compatible with science, therefore you should believe it, is not a sensible way to approach the search for truth about reality, or indeed the search for truth about morality. I'm going to touch on three areas where arguments for God are based on this kind of compatibility theory, the idea that you can't prove that it's wrong, therefore you should believe that it's correct. And the first is the sort of first cause argument: the universe must have a cause, and therefore that cause is God. Various sort of sub-lines along the way, but that's the gist of the argument. Now, there's a couple of problems with that as an argument. The first is that the universe, as we know it, is at a subatomic scale. And we know that the laws of cause and effect don't operate in the same way at that scale as they do when particles form together or combine together to form large or medium-sized objects. The second problem is that even if we assume that the universe had a cause, which isn't really controversial, even from an atheist perspective, if we're talking about the universe as in our universe, as opposed to the universe as in everything that exists, it's not controversial to suggest that the universe in which we live in, which we call the universe in the same way as we mistakenly call atoms atoms, even though the original word meant uncuttable, and we do know that they are now divisible. But it's not controversial to suggest that the universe in which we live in had a cause, but there's no route from that idea to the idea that the cause is a God, and certainly no route to the idea that it's a God that wants us to behave in any particular way. These are all just purely matters of personal opinion and preference. And then obviously there's the argument that if the universe was caused by God, what caused that God to exist, what caused whatever caused that God to exist, and if you come back to the argument that the God was there forever, then you can just as easily argue that the universe, as in all that exists, was there forever. The second argument that I'm going to touch on that's used in terms of this sort of compatibility and impossible to disprove theory is the design argument, that the universe is kind of fine-tuned for life, and in particular for human life in terms of those who believe in a Christian God. And again, there's a problem with that. The first is that very few parts of the universe are actually possible for us to live in. Indeed, very few parts of the planet Earth are suitable for us to live in. And we're only going to be able to live on this tiny little speck in the middle of the universe for a short period of time in the context of the amount of time that the universe will exist. It's not the case that the universe was fine-tuned for our existence. It's that our existence is fine-tuned for those tiny parts of the universe on Earth in which it is possible for us to live. Secondly, we don't know how likely or unlikely it is that the laws of physics have to be as they are, because we've only one sample set to examine, which is this universe. You can't base likelihood and probability on the basis of examining just one sample set. Thirdly, as we know, physics and chemistry and biology all demonstrate how it is possible for the illusion of design to gradually evolve by natural means without any conscious designer. And fourthly, and it's the same argument as I made before, even if you accept that the universe was designed, which I don't, even if you do accept that, there's no route from that to the belief that the designer is the conscious being that wants us to behave in any particular manner. And the final issue that I want to touch on there is the argument from morality that essentially is that moral laws exist and therefore there must be a moral lawgiver and that lawgiver must be God. Now there's any number of problems with that, but I'm going to start on the basis of hypothesizing that there isn't a God and looking at what morality would look like if we believe that there isn't a God. And whatever the detail, I think most of us would agree that morality is not about rocks or stones or trees. It's about how conscious, sentient, thinking beings interact with each other. And it's about whether we work together to minimize suffering and to maximize well-being, or whether we do the opposite. Now that's a pretty tricky task because we don't know what the impact of any of our actions is going to be, because there are so many interacting consequences down the line that all we can do really is make our best guess and try to act as kindly and as morally and as ethically as we can. But what religion does to that already difficult task is it adds in a corrupting factor of saying that even if a particular act is going to minimize suffering or maximize well-being, you shouldn't do it because the creator of the universe told somebody 2,000 years ago or 1,400 years ago or whatever time scale your particular preference is that you're to do something different anyway. And so religion uniquely enables good people to do bad things while thinking that they're doing good, and thus corrupts our natural sense of morality. The other religious arguments in that context include that the Pascal's wager argument that you should believe in God because if you believe that God exists and you're right, then you've gained everything, and if you're mistaken you lose nothing, and if you don't believe in God and you're correct you gain nothing, but if you're wrong you lose everything. And there's a lot of philosophical counters to that, but I'm just going to go with the one by Homer Simpson and The Simpsons, who said to Marge when she wanted him to go to church, "But Marge, what if we pick the wrong religion? Every week we're just making God madder and madder." And that's the main difference with the Pascal's wager argument, is that it depends not only on God existing, but being your preferred God out of the thousands and thousands of gods that humans have invented since time began. Finally, I want to say that the big difference between science and religion, and why you shouldn't believe in both, even if you can believe in sections of both, is that not only do they clash, but believing in religion corrupts your search for truth. Science constrains us, the scientific method constrains us to saying we're only going to believe what seems to be most likely based on applying reason to the currently best available evidence. Whereas religion just gives us permission to believe anything. Once you accept that the laws of nature can be changed on a whim by the creator of the universe to suit you and whatever you want at any given time, you can literally believe anything, and religious people typically do. So not only is it wrong in a sort of factual sense to say that you can consistently believe in science and religion, it's also unwise to do so. What happens in reality is that every generation we find out more and more using the scientific method about how the universe operates naturally. Every generation, the bits that we don't yet understand, religious people ascribe to God, and every generation there is less and less and less for this God to do. So it moves from being an all-powerful God that created the universe out of nothing to a God that today his main task seems to be appearing on pieces of toast. And every generation we move closer and closer to the truth that we will never ultimately reach, but that we will gradually come closer to using science than we ever can using religion. Thank you very much.